Welcome to the Launch Button Podcast, where we unlock the secrets of successful entrepreneurs and real estate investors who found the courage to hit the launch button and take control of their destiny. Join me, Hugh, best-selling author, seasoned real estate investor, and serial entrepreneur, as we dive deep into inspiring stories and invaluable lessons that will empower you to break free from the ordinary and pursue your true passions. Are you feeling trapped in a job that drains your passion and leaves you yearning for more? Are you ready to accelerate your business and or real estate investing to take it to the next level? It's time to ignite your dreams and embrace the limitless possibilities that life has to offer. Get ready to launch into the life you've always desired by pressing the launch button. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Launch Button Podcast, where we take entrepreneurs and business owners that have helped people scale and grow their businesses to new heights. And today we've got a special guest. We actually just got a chance to hang out in Arizona for a bit of time, and I really got to dive deep into Way's brain, and it's an amazing brain. They call him the wizard behind the scenes, and he's been in the human optimization space for over 30 years, starting as a seminar junkie, and then he's worked with some of the best in the world, people that run top 5 companies, all the way to entrepreneurs, and now they're coming out with an ability to reach millions and millions of people. So we want to bring Way to the stage here. And Way, tell everybody a little bit about what got you started in the human optimization process.
Hey, Hugh, appreciate that. Thank you for having me on here. That's almost a loaded question. How did Way get into the world of human optimization? Well, I'll tell you, if we really want to know the origins, the superhero origin story, so to speak, you kind of have to go all the way back to those tender years of junior high. I was one of those Breakfast Club kids that really didn't get along, where everybody grew up really fast and moved over into their respective circles and cliques. I was still stuck in grade school going, I thought we were all friends. What's happening? Right. And then I started hanging out with other misfits in the world that just basically, I still remember the locker next to mine was a friend of mine, and she was a total tomboy back in the day. But we were so awkward. We didn't even tell each other our names. We were friends for a while, ate lunch together until one day she walks into the girls' bathroom. I was like, wait, where are you going? And she goes, I'm a girl. I'm like, wait, what? Had I asked her name in the very beginning, then maybe I would have known. But the whole premise of that is that it got to a point where I was starting to be made fun of. I was getting bullied because I just didn't evolve quick enough to catch up with everybody blossoming into their social ecosystems. And then so it got to a point where, try as I might, like a lot of people, a lot of kids obviously go through this as well, where you get to a point where you feel like, well, then there must be something wrong with me because everybody else seems to be doing it.
Right.
I'm probably broken to some level, right? And then one day in class, we were, they used to hand out back in the day reports where people choose titles from the sheet that goes around the room and you cross off what you choose. And so when it got to me, there was like limited pickings because the teacher started on the other side of the room. And then when it got to me, I said, okay, well, what's left? And then there's one line there that caught my attention. It says mesmerism/hypnosis. And I'm thinking, cool, stage shows, fun times. And then I picked it and I started doing research on it. Well, come to find out, mesmerism was actually named after a real guy named Mesmer, who was healing people back in the day with stones or magnets and everything. But really what he was doing was the early form of hypnosis. He was having conversations with them. And when I started to learn about that, I thought, oh, not that I could learn this and understand the power of the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind to heal or help other people, but it was probably at that moment in time an opportunity for me to fix myself because I thought I needed to be fixed. Now, fast forward to today and everything, our premise behind what we do at HumanOp is that we believe that everybody's perfect as is. Nobody really needs to be fixed. Most of the time, the majority of the time, it's a deeper understanding of the unique nature of every misfit in the world, right? So now we're targeting the same people that I felt like I was growing up, which is, let's target the misfits. And the reality is, everybody's a misfit to some degree. Some misfits are just better at playing along in the ecosystem or the game that they're in, and others just never find a way in.
Everybody's hiding in some way, right? Like
Yeah.
hiding their insecurity. Some do it better than others. And I think that's
Yep.
why almost everybody gets into the personal development space. They're like, something's broken in me. Well, it's everybody else's fault, right? First, it's always everybody else's fault until the pattern repeats enough and you have the trauma and you're like, well, wait,
Yeah.
it must be the one common denominator is me. So
Yeah.
now I got to go look at that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so what happened was then learning about that. So after the report was done, I didn't stop. I kept diving deeper and deeper into that rabbit hole, started learning self-hypnosis, started really trying to unlock what was underneath, thinking that people start liking me. Because when you're young, that's all you really care about. Do people like me? Do I belong? And well, oddly enough, no surprise, it just actually made me weirder. Because I realized that to truly connect and communicate with another human being, you have to be able to find a way to bypass the critical factor known as the conscious mind and communicate on a deeper unconscious level, right? Well, when you're in junior high and even in high school, when you communicate to people that they still think you're weird. In fact, they think you're weirder because it's too triggering because it triggers people's vulnerability and authenticity. Because at that age, if we remember, we didn't know who we were. We didn't know what we were going to be. And everybody was still trying to figure each out. And so that's why we clumped together to find identity within the safety of numbers, right? And that's why cliques were formed. And so when I went through college and everything like that, I said, okay, great. It was just went through the whole process. But then but where it started to pay off was when I went into the workforce and I found out I was really good at sales. I was really good at communicating with people. And everybody said, well, you're just born with it. And for a while, I thought it was that too. But then I realized years later, no, it's because I spent so much time exploring the catacombs of the unconscious mind and understanding what makes human beings tick that I truly recognize the value of every single human being on the planet. So even though I went to UCLA for computer science and engineering because I didn't choose my major, my dad chose my major. I came out realizing I don't want to be a code monkey. I love people too much. I am so fascinated with the human condition because of what I went through and how I don't want anybody else to go through as much as I went through just to get to where I am today, right? And so that's in a way, in a nutshell, how I originally got into this obsession with optimizing human beings as a whole and helping human beings elevate to a new level of existence.
Well, it also sounds sort of like computer programming to some people out there. And you and I have that background. We both went down that path and could program computers and all those things. But we realize that human beings are much more complex than just ones and zeros, right? And
Right.
so we didn't always make computers do what we wanted in the outcome. With people, it's a bit different,
Yeah,
right?
it's a little
It's
bit
a
more
bit different.
nuanced.
Yeah, like, and that's what fascinated me on the whole personal development space is that two people could see the same situation and react
Hmm.
completely differently. One person will be
Yes.
like, "Oh, it was good," and one person's like, "That was horrible," and you're like, "Were we in the same room? Did you hear? Did you see the same thing? Did we just win?" And you're like, "No," and the other person's like, "No, we lost." I was like, "What do you mean?"
Yeah. I mean, it's like being in the same. I mean, we've all been in a car with somebody who has road rage and we're not raging with them. What happened? Are we in the same car? Or do we just see the same thing happen? What happened? And it's a
Yeah,
perception thing, right? There's nothing wrong with having a somewhat distorted or skewed perception. And even if you get angry and everything like that, a lot of people say, oh my God, they're a terrible person. It's like, nah, there is something that happened in their life where they choose a specific meaning or perception of event originally to protect themselves on some level. And that has just kind of evolved into the self-protection mechanism that may not necessarily be the most socially appropriate response. But if we really kind of trace it back, just like we trace it back to the origin stories of my entire existence, really, we will find that human beings are really doing all they can. One of the prime directives of the unconscious mind, of our deep inner being, is self-preservation.
right.
Right? And so we can't poo-poo on anything. I mean, even when people are dealing with disease and everything like that, we try to say like, one of my biggest I don't know if this is a topic we should broach or not, but like when people say F cancer, right? And stuff like that, it says, well, that thing just didn't come out of nowhere, right? Everything that happens in our body can only talk to us using what it knows how to do it by creating cellular circumstances within us. It doesn't use words. It doesn't talk to us, right? It uses the metaphor of our body to communicate to us, hey, we're kind of out of alignment. Something we should do differently, please.
And like the funny thing, Western medicine versus Eastern, right? Westerners, all right, let's give you a pill for that. Let's match, I guess, the symptom, but not really treat what caused it. And
Yeah,
that's the same thing that you're talking about there. When somebody's like, I have cancer, I got cancer, but it's like, no, what's causing that? Because it's going to keep repeating unless you dive
right.
deeper to find that. And that's the same thing people do with their minds, right? Like you
Hmm.
said, a lot of people have certain habits that they go into. It's triggered. They go back into a habit that allowed them to be
Yep.
saved in the past. And I know you work with a lot of people to release those triggers because, yes, that
Yeah.
saved us in the past, but we're not probably in that situation. If you were to, I've had people tell me crazy stories from their grandfathers doing things to them to like all sorts of
Yeah.
things just because you and I are very good at listening to people,
Yep.
right? A skill that most people haven't yet mastered. When you listen, people tell you way more things than they actually know they're doing. But
Yep.
how do we get people to start unlocking those triggers so they don't cause them to ruin relationships or ruin business deals
Yeah.
or those types of things? What are some
Yeah.
keys to doing that for
Yeah.
people?
That's a phenomenal question. And you and I, being our tech backgrounds, we're all about pattern recognition because that's how we debug things. We have to see what's going on with this pattern. Why is this happening, right? And I think that's one of the cool takeaways from our tech backgrounds is that we become really tuned in on noticing patterns. And the reality is human beings need to create patterns and behavior patterns just to make sense of the world. Because the universe in and of itself it operates in a quantum fashion, but that will make every human being, most human beings, go nuts, will go crazy trying to make sense from a quantum perspective. So that's why we linearize everything. Like 1 + 1 = 2. We create a linear type of distillation. We delete, distort, and we generalize, which sometimes in that process it distills things down to create meanings that may not necessarily be the most accurate meanings, right? I just did
Right.
a whole video for that community that you were part of with us in Arizona just yesterday. I don't know if you saw it. I posted it in the community, but it's about deconstructing triggers. And one of the things is that these patterns that we get into, often what we call triggers, in order to release those, I think a lot of people go to these seminars and these workshops, not to say that there's anything wrong with those, they're better than nothing, not doing anything at all.
Right.
But what they do is they throw everything in the kitchen sink at the end result, trying to fix it. What we need to understand is, well, how did we get there to begin with? Right? And so to do that, you have to deconstruct the trigger. And it all starts with a trigger. When a trigger happens, and then we have some kind of a response, right? But the trigger is not arbitrary. It just doesn't spontaneously show up. There is a strategy that leads us to getting triggered, right? And the strategy starts with, okay, let's reverse engineer. If at this moment you're feeling yourself triggered and this is a inappropriate emotional response that you don't want to have anymore, what you want to do is you want to find that trigger point and reverse engineer it and go back to what meaning you made to an experience or a situation that then gave you the validation that you should have this trigger. This trigger is based on a meaning or perspective that you alone made to co-create whatever conflict or whatever challenging situation is happening in the moment. I had this conversation just earlier with one of our team members. I said, when there is a conflict between two people, the first person to take 100% responsibility for their contribution to that conflict or to that experience is the one that actually wins. Not the
Percent.
one who can, like, you know, beat that person to submission and say, I win. That's not the winner.
Well, that's how most arguments go. But for people out there, if you don't fully understand what you're saying, it's that one family member that walks in and says like "boo" to you, and you like fly off the handle because you expect them to like be putting you down or something. And it's all in our brain, right? It's wired and
Yep.
fired together, and the synapse just fires, and we get super heightened. But that was a
Yeah.
huge point that you just said, Way, right? Most people go into arguments to win instead of to understand. And the
Right.
first person that says, "Hey, it's my fault," and I've done this a lot to people, it really messes them up when we have an argument. They're like, no, okay, I take responsibility for everything I did. And they're
My bad. This is my contribution. Now, that's the first step. I think, and a lot of times when I work with clients, I don't say anything in the beginning. And then as they get better at that, they hit another sticking point, right? Because they hit another sticking point of being completely exhausted and not knowing how to move forward from there. And the tricky thing is, and this is where I'm so fascinated with linguistics and everything, is the language of fault and responsibility are there's nuances to them, but there's a subtle difference, sometimes a big difference, right? There is a tendency to associate taking responsibility as being taking fault for it, right? So the next evolutionary step beyond that, first you have to say, yeah, just being willing to say, okay, it's my fault. That's a huge step. And then the next step after that is to let go of that language and the energy behind fault. There's a frequency dynamic that is embedded with the lexicon and the word and language use of fault, is actually personal responsibility. Personal responsibility means there is no fault, it's just ownership of contribution, right? So if you think of it from an energy standpoint, when you blame somebody else or something, right? Denial, delusion, and blame. Dr. Carl Lasko in his book Bullshit, right? Brilliant book. I would highly recommend anybody who wants to read it to understand what's wrong with the world. Emotional BS. It's denial, delusion, and blame. If you blame somebody or something for a circumstance that you're being challenged with in that moment, the minute you point or direct your focus and energy away towards something else outside of you, you literally give away all power to change your circumstance. Now, if you blame yourself,
Oh, wait. Say
right?
that again because that's like the golden nugget already in the first 10, 15 minutes of this. Say that again. When you're pointing at somebody else and you
Yeah.
blame them, you give away all your power. What was that?
Yeah. So when you blame an external source for the problems that you're dealing with right now, you've literally given away all the power that you have to that source, meaning you have no power to change your circumstance. You reserve nothing for yourself. And now you are dependent on this external source of your current challenge to fix or change your current situation. And this is where people get stuck.
Because they
Yeah.
can't fix it now, right? It's their fault. It's
Yeah.
always their fault. It's not my fault. Hands
It's not
up.
my fault. It's out of my control. Well, that's
Right.
what you're basically doing, right? So personal responsibility, then, well, then it's my fault. There's a little bit of weirdness that happens when you say, oh, it's my fault. Well, you're basically cutting yourself off at the knee. You're blaming yourself. I would almost rather people go blame an external source because when you blame yourself, you're actually just dispersing the energy to no one, including yourself. You're just like having a complete adrenaline dump, and now you're just sitting there going, now nobody, nothing, including myself, can change my circumstance because it's my fault. Oh well, what can I do? Right?
Right.
Now, the little nuance of personal responsibility is, hmm, okay, this is my contribution. This was the master choice moment where I made a decision, whether it be a decision of perception or a decision of action, that then ultimately led to this moment, which means in the future, should I be presented with a similar type of situation, in case I can't reverse engineer this one, I will literally make a different choice. This is when we start to bring the power of change and power of evolution and power of growth back to our ecosystem. We bring it all back. And the more of the responsibility you're willing to take, the more ownership of the master choice, because sometimes you can get away with doing, I 50% was me and 50% was the other person. Okay, fine. Better than nothing, right? But if you can take 100%, think of the power that you have to dictate how things are going to unfold in the future. You have all the power at that point.
Right.
That's empowerment.
That's awesome. And for everybody listening out there, that would take you like 20 years of therapy to get there, by the way. And we always joke the difference between therapy and coaches is right. As coaches, we equip you with ways to actually deal with the situation, not just listen to you and do that. But like that would be like if
Yeah.
you understood what Wade just said, go back, rewind it a few times, 5, 10, 20 times, whatever you got to do. But understand if you start taking that level of responsibility for that, nobody's going to be able to trigger you. Nobody's going to ever be able to put you into those situations. And so, wait, as you've been building your career with us, and we'll get to the technology here in a couple of minutes, but as
Sure.
you've been building this, you started to not only test this with like individuals, but you're working with high net worth, high influence people, and they have the same issues as everyday people. Everybody's like, oh, they're so much better or different. No, they just deal with it at a higher level. And they're even more extreme often on these types of things, right? And
Yeah.
now they've got hundreds of people that work with them. How do you help them understand not only themselves but then their teams?
That's a There's a lot to that. You're right. One of the things is those who don't have the resources, as these high net worth individuals or very powerful individuals do, I found actually have an easier time getting to the root cause of their challenges and being able to evolve as a human being. The tricky thing about those who are well-to-do, high net worth, have created what society has validated a certain level of success, there's something that happens on a deep unconscious level that they actually have to battle now is well, it's worked for me so far. Society and culture has also validated that. What motivation do I have to change and evolve and grow? If anything, people around me should change to match what I've done, right?
Right.
That's what we call the distorted ego of success, right?
It's like
And we
the
see it a
Michael
lot.
Jordan, right? Like Michael Jordan, the best basketball player ever, became a coach, became the GM. He's like, why can't you just do it like me? I do it. Like I got the drive, I've got the motivation. Why aren't you like me?
Right. Yeah, and that's what happens. And I think there's something that we're seeing a lot more of in the influencer world. It's pretty new, is that clout can only get you so far, but it doesn't mean that you're good at everything, right? And so people who recognize that, they know how to leverage clout and influence in a way that actually helps people. But those who haven't figured it out, they're crashing and burning left and right. They're just, I don't know, they're imploding upon themselves and taking people with them.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of that, and people are drawn to that drama. But going back to these individuals, so at the end of the day, and this is why I love my current iteration, how we're helping people, is that they're still humans. And I believe that every human being is unique and thus has a unique value proposition. And with that unique value proposition comes a unique unlock code of access to the essence of who and what they are, right? If we're able to access that and decode that, you and I had a late night conversation about that. Once we're able to access that, then they're no different than the next Joe down the street, right? I Years ago, when I was at Third Street Promenade in Santa Monica, out hanging out with some friends when I was at UCLA, they lost track of me for a while, and they turned around and was like, "Where's Way?" And they found me sitting on the floor talking to a homeless guy. And this homeless guy was brilliant. Holy cow. Our conversation was about quantum physics, theory, the nature of the universe, and everything like that. And he was lucid. He knew what he was talking about. Every once in a while, something would trigger him, and then it kind of made sense while he was homeless. But it was fascinating. And it woke me up to the fact that it doesn't matter where you exist in the ecosystem of modern day culture and society, every human being has value. And whether or not you're willing to go on this journey to identify what that is, or you allow the world to showcase to you, or you ignore those who try to take that away from you, that really is what then ultimately shapes how you show up in the world. And so these high net worth individuals, once as time went on, I came really good at finding that decoder process to get access to the true essence of who and what they are. They become no different than the startup that I work with, that they're wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to just soak it all in. These high net worth people are no different. They're human beings just like everybody else. I had celebrities and tech thought leaders, household names that everybody knows of as clients. And it's this beautiful dance that we have where I get to learn so much about what they've done to bring into the world, and also recognize that, like anybody else, they're still human at the end of the day.
Right. And that's what it all boils down to, but they just have that extra level, and people, like you said, have put them on pedestals for whatever reason
Right.
in today's world. And I know you've worked with Fortune 5 CEOs, and you've worked with stars that everybody would know to help
Yeah.
them like move through their life and put the right team around them. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with, especially entrepreneurs and startup, is finding the right people
Yeah.
to work with. You go through a lot of churn and burn. People,
Yep.
lots of people say they can deliver things. Who can? Are they in the right roles? So I know you've been working on this technology, you, Lisa, and Dr. Zana behind the scenes there, to
Mhm.
create this new app that eventually, pretty soon, we'll be able to release to the world. right? They'll
Yeah.
be able to get access to it. It's still in the beta phase, so it's coming out soon. So stay plugged into the podcast. We'll let you know when it drops, and you
Yep.
guys can all have access to that. But talk a little bit about what that technology can do for people from startups to Fortune 50 CEOs.
You're actually going to get access to it hopefully as early as next week just to kind of play with it. So that's exciting. So watch for
Well,
that.
we've been playing with
Um,
it. My team, by the way, my team loves it. Like we're starting to change language and culture and
nice.
full disclosure, my assistant Jill, executive assistant, whatever, she does my everything. It predicted she was going to have a breakdown. She had the breakdown just before she took the quiz. So Brandon was like, you better talk to her right now. You're burning her out. I was like, she hasn't worked for 2 weeks. She was dealing with family. It's family issues. Like, not me, Brandon. And
Yeah.
then it's helped couples on our team and different people communicate already. So
Beautiful.
they're super excited about it.
Yeah, and I love how you've surrounded yourself with some really amazing people because you said I think on a different call that you didn't prompt this. They prompted it themselves just based and that's great feedback for us because okay, the technology is not so terrible that they can't figure it out on their own.
Yeah.
But that's really what we want to do is empower people with the power of objective understanding. And that's the most important thing. I think and I came from a lot of those camps where you can train and mold and shape a human being to doing anything, right? And to the point where you're practically manipulating the dynamics. I got trained so many years in the areas of neurolinguistics, and one of my biggest challenges around that tool that is it's powerful and it has the ability to convince somebody that they can be good at something when by nature they're not necessarily designed to be that way. Because here's the pros and cons of being human. The pros is human beings are amazing machines. We can learn and be trained to do just about anything. The con is human beings are amazing machines and we can learn and be trained to do just about anything. It's a double-edged sword,
So true. So true.
right? But just because we've all experienced this. We go and get a certification. We go to school and we learn a specific craft. And we come out here and we realize we hate what we're doing. We don't like what we're doing. So what if we're good at it? But if we're not naturally designed by nature to perform a certain way, it's like asking a squirrel to swim across the ocean like a whale. It just doesn't happen, right? It might be able to happen, but it's
It's a
not probably
struggle.
the best use of that squirrel, right? And that's kind of what we've identified. 20 years of research, patent about 10 years ago. What I love of what Dr. Zana did, who's the progenitor of this technology, one of our co-founders, she never really goes around and says, "Oh, this is my technology," a guru type of mentality. What I love one time when I was watching her in the early years about her explaining to somebody, it says, "Oh, your technology," and she's just kind of like, so it's not really my technology. I just figured out how to translate what nature's been telling us for the last 2 billion years or 2 million years. Was it 2 billion that human beings around? Anyway, yeah, 2 million years.
Give or take a billion.
Yeah, 1.8 million, I think I saw the other day, where language was only invented 50,000 years ago, modern language as we know it. Okay, people think language has been around forever. Not really. So how did human beings survive the rest of the million, 95, no, 75 million years? We survived by understanding what we saw in nature. Now, the beautiful thing about modern language that as it's evolved to today is that though it can be used to lie to ourselves and others, it can also be used to finally translate into language what nature has been telling us on how to navigate the world in the most optimal way since day one. That's essentially what our technology has done. And what that has afforded you and your team and all these other teams out there to do is to do a very precise and efficient gap analysis to understand this person's a really good taskmaster. This person, not so much. So don't expect them to do that. But this other person that isn't a taskmaster is a really good strategist. Put those two together. This person builds the strategy, this person executes. Bam, you've got a great thing. But wait, how do they know where they're going to go? Oh, well, this person over here has a really high volume in his leadership, capabilities. The leadership, the way we define it in our ecosystem is that it has the ability to take a panoramic view, long-term ripple effect, ability to see great distances into the future and all around. You pair that person with these two, now you have someone who can see the bigger picture of things and make sure the strategies and execution of it are in line with that bigger picture.
Right.
We can now literally combine combinations of human beings and organizations like Lego pieces and then do it in such a way so that what you do is then you can consistently create these templates, which is what we've done for larger organizations who have multiple teams in the same department. We can create all-star teams over and over again simply by defining through the mathematical data on the back end what type of human beings are best fit for the specific roles in that task force, so to speak, right?
And that saves lots of conflict. That saves lots of
Oh my
people
God.
like,
Yeah.
wanting to stay with companies because we know it's not often about the dollar amount. It's about how they
Yep.
feel. So if they feel like they're optimized and they feel like they're being respected and their point of views are there
Yeah.
and then put them in the right roles, and people tend to thrive and do way more than you ever expected to even ask for. It's pretty
Yeah.
crazy like that, those results.
I know retention goes through the roof in terms of positivity. And the most beautiful thing is that the performance is sustainably high. Performance, I think a lot of organizations will try to shoot for high performance and they struggle with maintaining it because they're pushing people beyond sustainability. What we're able to define is what is the highest level performance you can expect out of this human being that can be maintained sustainably. And the way we do that is we put them in a lane that they love to be in. Like all of us in every job that we had some aspect of the job that we absolutely loved. Like, oh, I love doing it. I could do this all day long. So why not do that all day long? We practice what we preach over here in HumanOp is that we make sure that people come in with the gifts that they have and they say, okay, let us know. Do you like doing this? No, then don't do that. Do you like doing this? Oh, I love doing that. Okay, let's put that on your plate. And little by little, we understand why, because we have the data that backs it up. Now, do people ever come in and say, oh, I love doing that? And we look at their results and they're like, no, I think you were nurtured to like that, but do you really like that? And this is why you keep burning out. It's like, oh, you know what? You got a point there. Right. And so sometimes we have to redefine what they actually do like and let go of the undesirable nurtured behavior patterns that they lived with or experienced in their life up to this point.
And going all the way back to the beginning because that's what they were taught to do. Like you and I, we didn't love computers, but we were good at math. So our parents were like, "Go do that. It's the cool thing, right? It's
Exactly.
gonna You're gonna make a lot of money. Go do that." So
Exactly. Yeah.
100% there with that. Now, and
Yep.
and I guess that's also where, like I read Elon Musk's book and he talks about how they got crazy results from people in those short bursts and sprints, but the people would burn out, right? So what you're saying is, hey, here's a way where you could be like Elon, yet, and I know he's a polarizing figure right now, so we're not going down any politics with it, but yet then be able to sustain that because people just keep going because it's feeding themselves. And we
Yeah.
always joke as entrepreneurs about how we do that. We're like, yeah, we quit our job so we can work 80 hours a week instead of 40, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, no, the whole world of entrepreneurship has been romanticized primarily by people who are selling the entrepreneurs programs and courses and everything like that, right? I remember there was a period of time when I was on the speaking circuit and I would go to a room full of entrepreneurs. And one of my favorite opening lines is, how many of you here are entrepreneurs? It was a rhetorical question because I was at an event with entrepreneurs and everybody raised their hand. I said, my hands raised too. And I said, okay, the first thing I want to say, y'all crazy. You know that, right?
yep.
Because who in their right mind would choose, knowing what you know now, keep your hands raised, right? How many of you would still have your hands raised, knowing what you know now at the very beginning that you would still be an entrepreneur today? And a lot of people put their hands up. I wouldn't either because I was like, oh my God, if I knew I was going to go through this type of dynamic in my life just to figure it out, I don't know. I'd probably think twice.
Yeah.
But now I'm in too deep. I've gone too far. I can't stop now.
And that's where everybody is, right? Once you cross that chasm of that entrepreneur roller coaster, you're like, forget it. I don't care what happens. Like, we can
Yeah.
go high, we can go low. Like, we know it's just a ride, right?
Exactly, exactly. And it's so funny. I mean, going back to what you're talking about Elon, if only people could let go and recognize the distortion that media has, and even social media has in terms of what it pushes a human being to show up a certain way, and how it distorts how a human being is showing up to an image of a human being in a way that may not necessarily be who or what they are, right? And every human being is fallible. And
Right.
so thus making those decisions, pushing people because just because you can do that doesn't mean the rest of the world can. And just because the rest of the world can do a certain thing doesn't mean you can. Right. And if we can get back to that, I mean, in that book, Four Agreements, right, in terms of Don Miguel Ruiz, he's one of the agreements is, don't take things personally and always do your best, right? Those two agreements right there. That's what it comes down to when what we can facilitate is to eliminate the need to compare and contrast in order to elevate or deprecate self to try to figure it out. When we can give people a clear, objective definition of what they are in this world, they don't have to compare anymore. They can just spend the rest of their time optimizing every decision that they make moving forward because that as they stay in that optimized way, it honors what they are. We spend our lives and know thyself, right? And then we're taught that in the personal development community, know thyself, awareness, right? I think a lot of it stops there because most people up to this point historically have not fully answered that question. Know thyself. Who are you, right? And it's like, well, I know some of myself. The next step after that, though, is after you know thyself, there's a step beyond that, which is honor thyself. And what we're able to help people do is go that one step beyond. Now that you know what you are, this is how you honor that vehicle so that vehicle can express itself and blossom into the most optimal version of what you are.
It's crazy that it can identify that and do that. And for everybody on here, go to launchbuttonpodcast.com. We'll have the inside podcast where Whale go deeper into that second part right there that he talked about. Because I know it, like I've had it. And it was funny when we were going to your event in Arizona, and Lisa was like, "Hey, does anybody have anybody that sort of triggers them and those types of things?" And I'm like, the same person keeps repeating in my life, right? In the same way. Like it's a different
Yeah.
person, right? But it's the same
Yeah.
issue where somebody's, and with the four agreements, one of the things is they're like be impeccable with your word, right? That's part of it. And
Yeah.
I've actually got those. Funny, I've got those right over there. I keep them right by my desk, so I'm always like, impeccable with your word. Take responsibility. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. And then I run into
Yep.
people that their word doesn't matter to them. They'll say yes to something, and then like 2 weeks later, be like, "Yeah, I just don't feel like doing it," and I didn't tell you. And it's like those drive me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to work on rewiring my brain and things the way in the technology and
Yeah.
group to be like, okay, what responsibility am I taking for that situation, right? Versus just being
Yeah.
like, okay, I just don't work with you anymore.
Well, remember, there's a part of you that is highly sensitive to what is just and what is right,
And by the way, that's
and
that's my regal trait in the software and in the technology. You guys will learn more about that when we get it inside. But that's
the regal will then the decision made by the regal is for the benevolence for what's the greater good of all. The part of you actually, in combination with that regal, is the energetic. That's where the shining armor. That's where the crusader that will fight for what's just and right. That's that part of you right there. And so, what keeps you from going off the rails and just like destroying those who are injustice, right? That have performed injustice is, like you said, that regal, that benevolent king that lives within you will say, well, what is in the greatest good for all? What is the choice that I make at this point, right? And yeah, I mean, I think that's what's being triggered. And also, yeah, there's probably some things that we were taught growing up that, if you don't follow through, like I know in my world, like if we don't follow through with our word, we get punished,
right.
in a nice way.
Yeah,
Let's just put it that way, right? So, anybody who grows up with that, not only do you have a natural trigger for those who have energetic trait and have that, you know, crusader of justice within them, but there's also a nurtured trigger, which is like, well, if I don't make this right, or if I did the same thing that that person did, I would have been beat. Okay, well, then I need to beat them, or something to that effect. It's
right.
distorted, but yeah,
Yeah,
but that's how.
100%. So wait, before we wrap up this podcast for people, tell everybody a little bit about the technology and what it does and how it can help.
Yeah. So the technology itself essentially is a 10 to 15 minute assessment technology that gives every human being a unique result. 8 billion people on the planet, 8 billion different results. But the beautiful thing is the results are based on physics, math, science, and nature. And so it is the reason why we're the only human assessment technology out there that is patentable is because it's not based on psychometrics. It's heavily weighted on the physics of that human being. What that does, it gives you a calibration on the part of human beings that changes the least over time, not our psychometry, but our physiology. So, with that in mind, what happens is you can take that information, one, for yourself and really kind of like the way I like to describe it is like imagine taking 30, 40 years of trial and error and personal development growth work and squashing it down to a 10 to 15 minute investment of time and energy, and then maybe up to an hour of diving into your results. We not only give you a clear data, an idea of what you are, and so you don't have to guess anymore what drives you, you communicate, your best way to acquire information, how you should set up and biorhythmically set up your day and schedule a day out. But it also answers the question, now what do I do with this data? Oh, okay, so it's more than just like, okay, this is what you are. Yay, that was fun. Facebook personality quiz. No, now we say this is how you use it to make your life better. So that's what the technology essentially does. You can use it in the context of home, personal relationships, or within an organization to optimize yourself as a leader or even you as a team member within your organization.
Awesome. And the cool thing is that it's an app on your phone. You can get it on your
Yep.
desktop so you can take it with you. You can learn
Yep.
about your teams. So if you run a company, you can have everybody on your company on there so you know
Yep.
not necessarily how to talk to them, but you know how to optimize them and make sure they're in a position to win and keep it growing because like what you said, it can be used for manipulation. We've just all seen people do that with NLP, in the dating
Hmm.
scene and all those things, try to use it for
Yeah.
manipulation versus let's help people and optimize them and use it in a good way.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
so we
No,
wanted you to
exactly.
use it for good and bring out your superpower.
Yeah, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, if everybody understands that you have a unique value proposition that nobody else can contribute to this world, why is there any need to manipulate anything else? Everybody just steps up, and what we can create is really set up human beings to be what we truly are designed to be, stewards of the planet, stewards of making this world a better place. And so hopefully we can help inspire that in what that we do, both as an organization and with the technology that we put out there. And I suspect that your audience is probably very much in line with that, if they're any reflection of how you are as a human being. So I'm really excited about what this can do for anybody who's listening right now.
Awesome. So we're going to go to the Inside Podcast here in a second, but for everybody right there, go to the launchbuttonpodcast.com so you guys can be there. We're going to sort of break down some of those traits, like Wei was saying, my regal, my energetic, so people have a little better understanding of what those are. And then you guys can start applying them in your life to you, your teams, and everything like that. We'll have a
Yeah.
link for the app below. We'll put all of Wei's contact information in there or however he wants to be connected with you so you guys can follow along on the journey. And we look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode of the podcast. Have a great day. Thank you, Wei, for your time and sharing your wonderful knowledge and your journey from middle school to today. And we'll see everybody soon. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us on the Launch Button Podcast, your gateway to unlocking your true potential and pursuing your passions. Don't let the journey end here. For more empowering insights, valuable resources, exclusive content, and free giveaways, visit www.thelaunchbuttonpodcast.com.